and welcome back to Homer Bound. We are on episode 7. Yes, I just had to do some math. I didn't put the number in the notes.
Numbers are hard.
They
Numbers
are
very
hard.
hard.
Although it's only been a couple days since we recorded our last episode. We're rushing. Rushing has negative connotations. We are blitzing through these last couple episodes due to some scheduling stuff I mentioned last time. But yeah, welcome to episode 7 of Homer Bound, a podcast where a couple nerds read through and discuss Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. I am Wriste.
And I am Llama.
How are you doing, Llama?
I'm doing okay. I had a little fun in Philadelphia with some friends of mine this weekend, and now I'm glad to be back talking about some epic Homer.
I think we talked a little bit about it, about the time we spend between these episodes and how this is always occupying my mind. I guess I'm curious, like, is this stuff sort of just like chilling at the forefront of your thoughts at all times, or is this just, are you able to keep it down? You have a healthy
extent,
a healthy relationship with it.
It's definitely on my thoughts, and you know, when you're talking with friends or family and they're asking what's going on in your life and you're telling them, oh, I'm recording a podcast, you know, that'll come up, but also just constantly kind of picking through the pages of both the Iliad and the Odyssey and kind of thinking about what we're going to be talking about. It's definitely been on my mind a lot.
Do you ever, like when you're watching YouTube videos or like watching a movie or a television show or reading something that's not this, do comparisons or thoughts of the material ever just come to your mind?
I would say I definitely have random thoughts about it. I'm not so sure that I do comparisons when, you know, watching other stuff, just because the other stuff that I tend to watch is so different.
Sure,
yeah. Been spending a lot of time watching the Great British Baking Show lately, which,
okay.
You know, is not that relatable unless we're talking about the goat cheese in the wine or what have you. There's not much to relate to the Iliad or the Odyssey.
Are you saying you can't map the like the Greek and Trojan heroes onto the various baking contestants? Or are the judges not like gods?
I suppose. Ooh, if the judges were gods, who would Mary Berry and Paul Hollywood be? I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
I'll have to watch the Great Baking, whatever it's called. I don't know if
the Great British Baking Show.
Great British Baking Show. Yeah, I feel like I've heard of it more than a little bit, but I don't know if it's all been from you or if it's been like just around. People seem to watch it, though.
It's been around. People have been pretty wild about it for quite some time now. And actually, the hosts I mentioned are not the current hosts, but they are the ones that I like. And I rewatch those episodes because I want to learn how to bake pretty things.
So you're like a Doctor Who fan. You know, you like certain eras and you stick in them. And
oh, I am a serial rewatcher of shows and movies, as evidenced by my obsession with Lord of the Rings and various other nerd series
stuff
or epics.
And I mean, I can't fault you too much because, you know, I've reread the Iliad more times than I can count. I'm in the same boat. Can I reveal a revelation that I had while I was watching some unrelated content?
By all means, please.
So you of course recall this has come up a lot. I imagine it'll come up again, not just in our discussion of the Iliad, but the Odyssey as well. Like, what our attitude toward Achilles is, like not just ours, but I guess ours in like a royal ours, like a meta ours, like how we tend to view him as like beautiful, which can sometimes be shorthand for like, if not good, then at least worthy of our sympathy or what have you. And I was watching, completely unrelated. I was watching. This is a video game reference. I don't know if you've played The Last of Us.
No, but I've heard a great deal about it. It won all those like Game of the Year, won a bunch of Game of the Year awards and stuff like that. It's been really, really huge. So I've definitely heard a lot about it.
I'll spoil the ending, I suppose. So if anyone has not somehow played or watched or otherwise been exposed to
Big spoilers incoming.
spoilers incoming, I guess I haven't. Llama, do you care if
I don't care at all.
Okay.
I am not one of those people who has ever really cared very much about being spoiled for just about anything, with a
Okay,
few
cool.
exceptions. So go
If
for it.
if anyone does worry about that, then I guess skip forward maybe 5 minutes. I don't know. Whatever. It's been out for a while. So the main character Joel is one of the characters. This character you play a lot is a character you spend a lot of time with throughout the journey. Really well acted. The whole thing is well written. Troy Baker plays Joel, but in the end, Joel makes a decision that basically damns all of humanity to like this like to have to continue to deal with this zombie infection. There was a cure, and it involved his travel companion Ellie, who would have to die in order for this cure to be manufactured. And he chose to save her over letting humanity have its chance. But people were still very, very attached to him. Like he, like holding in some very affectionately. Which is not to say that he has no redeeming qualities. You know, his relationship with Ellie was very, I guess, nice. It was relatable. It was sort of a father-daughter thing, and with his backstory, having lost his own daughter, we can kind of relate to that. But I was watching this review, and it was talking about how in the follow-up game, Joel dies very, very early. I guess spoilers for Last of Us 2 as well.
Ruined.
Everyone knows about this. And it seems like it seems like there was a lot of misplaced love for Joel, and there's a failure to recognize just how selfish a decision it was that he ended up making, and that people failed to recognize him as the sort of villainous character that he was. And I think this is present in a lot of like television shows as well. Like Hannibal is a good example.
Hannibal's a great example of that.
I haven't watched it, but have you watched what's it called? Breaking Bad. That one.
Breaking Bad was great. Yeah,
I've heard only good things about it. I know enough to say that Walter White probably falls within this category.
Oh yeah, I think it's a total kind of pet character where they're kind of awful, but you love them so much, and the character means so much to the series that you kind of give them a break. I don't know how that could possibly relate to Achilles. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
I mean the connection there is pretty direct, and it makes a lot of sense. Just you kind of form this affection for a character that you watch, and it allows you to ignore a lot of the negative qualities about them.
Yeah, it changes how you engage. I remember reading that the person who played Walter White's wife got a lot of like legitimate hate because she was holding Walter White back or something from doing all of the terrible crime things that he was doing, which is so backwards on paper, right? Because she's right, right? Like this.
Right, your husband is, selling meth and murdering people all the time, and your objection to this is noted as like being a bitch and a bad wife, and
yeah.
But he has cancer, and it's like, but he's also dealing meth and murdering people, and like even just the way he acts in the series is highly unsympathetic. He's an awful guy.
Which, and to be clear,
people love him.
Yeah, and to be clear, I don't think it's wrong to love him. We're clearly made to like want to. I'll move to something that I'm more familiar with, which is Hannibal. Like I'm thinking.
I love that show.
I'm thinking the TV show. I also have not. I've neither read the books nor, believe it or not, watched the movie, which I should definitely do both of which I should do at some point.
I think you should. I think you would like it both the show and the movie very much. I have seen the show, seen the movie, and read the book. So I'm very well versed in Hannibal, and
that'll be the next podcast. We'll go through each episode of Hannibal.
That's going to be a far more food-centric podcast.
I would actually love to hear Anyway, we're getting we're getting off.
We're getting sidetracked
We're getting
here.
a little off
It's
topic.
okay.
Anyway, these sorts of characters were always very interesting to me. It was, in fact, it's what I wrote my it's what I did my capstone on in college, actually. These challenging, these morally challenging characters that we somehow like for some reason. They're super weird. I still don't know how exactly we're supposed to engage with them because, we have, as sort of, this is a grand broad statement, I think we have sort of as a culture embraced Achilles as like a kind of hero regardless of what he's done, or whatever, and what that means for us, like how we engage with fiction, myth, characters, what have you. I'm still not, again, I'm still not totally sure what the takeaway is. Like, why do I love these like despicable characters? Is it just the way they're presented? Like, do I just like powerful people doing
It could
powerful
be, and
things?
I think also in a large way is kind of following what culture tells us about these people, which is to say, I think it was probably a very long time ago that people kind of decided that they really liked Achilles, and that discussions around the Iliad have probably leaned towards a more favorable portrayal of Achilles, and that shapes the way that people see things in the future, including, us right now. So it's interesting to see, and also to kind of wonder about like how as time has gone on, how, favorably or unfavorably have people reacted to Achilles in this book.
I was thinking about what you said, like what does Achilles look like? And I wonder, like an ugly Achilles, like an Achilles who is as scarred on the outside as he is on the inside. Like that would be sort of a terrifying thing to see. I would imagine.
It'd be fascinating to, see what various types of physical portrayals of Achilles there could be, because I think there could be a range,
Mm-hmm.
ranging from the stunningly gorgeous Brad Pitt and
Mm-hmm.
his,
His butt
incredible
cheeks,
body. His good lord, his ass in that movie is just astounding.
very smackable.
But also, would be very interested to see what a more kind of brutish and less polished Achilles would look like. And given that we're not really, as far as I know, given a physical description of him, like it could be either of those. It could be somewhere in between. It, could be hideous.
Yes,
Who
it's kind of up to
knows?
your interpretation. I was
I will
also,
continue to picture Brad Pitt though, because that is just generally very
it's a
pleasing to
happy
me.
place. It's a happy place.
It is a happy
I've
place.
I've been trying to. I was actually thinking about, who has anyone actually gotten any like physical description, and the only ones I can think of are like Paris and Helen and anyone else who is like explicitly beautiful.
Yeah, which kind of makes sense, especially in the case of Helen, the face that launched 1,000 ships.
Mm-hmm.
She's gorgeous. We know this. Otherwise, Aphrodite
Yeah,
wouldn't have been like, let me smush you two pretty people together.
smoosh.
Make a little pretty person sandwich.
Moving on from that, and we will actually get some smooshing later on in this episode.
We sure will.
Book 14. I actually like that we're doing book 13 and book 14 back to back because I think that these books together show just how much the gods have control, or like how much the gods influence the battle.
And it's interesting because, like, these books are so different. One of them is
Yeah.
very battle heavy and intense and violent, and the other one is kind of steamy and there's some action going on, and not the type of action that we've been seeing so far. It is some hugging and kissing action.
Well, there's a lot of preparation for hugging and kissing. The
There's
hugging and the
there's
kissing
also a
is
lot of, it's another one of those books that I feel like has the kind of Pink Panther-y music to it, as Hera is kind of planning, her little trick. But I'm sure we'll get into that in much more depth.
yeah, we're a bit ahead of ourselves. In fact, book 13 is necessary to set up book 14 because
It really is.
because Zeus is not exactly sure what he was thinking. At the very start of book 13, Zeus has sort of set everything in motion. We've talked about his lightning bolts and his rain of blood. He sends Iris to, give Hector instructions. He's been super involved. None of the other gods have been able to do anything except for Strife, who Zeus gave explicit permission to stand on Odysseus' ship and yell for a while. But then Zeus just sort of says, all right, we're good. Everything's working out. And he heads to the top of the mountain and just kind of chills, just kind of hangs out.
Yeah, no, reminds me of like the Emperor in Star Wars when he's just like, good, everything is proceeding exactly as I had foreseen. And then he's just sitting in his little egg chair, like watching Luke and Darth Vader duke it out. It gives me that kind of feel to it. Just Zeus like kind of twiddling his beard or whatever, and good. All right. I like where this is now. Let's leave this alone a little bit.
I almost imagine it being even more passive than that. I imagine him like, he's got like a hammock or something. It says that he like looks out to the Thracian fields or whatever and is like looking at, I don't know, pretty stuff.
It says, yeah, he gazed a world away, which kind of gives me almost that like, not in the traumatic way, but that like 1,000-yard stare kind of feel.
It's a very on the seventh day God rested sort of vibe.
Well, he is the god. The god of gods.
I'm not literally drawing a line between this and the Bible, but it has that kind of vibe. It's like, oh god, I'm done. It's over. Zeus basically turns his back to the action, which is exactly where we finally get more of Poseidon.
Which I was super psyched for.
To jump back into some video games super quickly, I think the way that Poseidon is portrayed in Hades, the video game by Supergiant Games, it fits this portrayal of him in the Iliad so well.
So much. And it was like, so this was one of the few times where I had a hard time separating the character from Hades and the character from the Iliad, because I can totally see this Poseidon, ahoy there, little nephew, just having that like really powerful booming voice and
it's very bombastic
badass
and energetic
beard.
It's funny. So the gods have appeared to multiple people at multiple points in this book. I don't know if we've like noted or tracked them, but all of these appearances are kind of different. I'm not really sure what the implication is for each of these, because they make these decisions consciously. Like Athena appears to Achilles in book 1 as Athena. She doesn't wear someone's face or something. She just like boink.
I feel like that's one of the few times the gods appear in their actual god form, as opposed to a disguise or under some kind of veil.
Iris I don't think she disguises herself, or maybe sometimes she has. She did in book 3. But then we have, and we know this from the Odyssey, and we even know this from the Iliad. Athena is very good at disguising herself. She's never like found out. She tricks Hector into fighting Achilles. That's like the one that stands out to me. But in the Odyssey, she's just always playing dress up. But compare and contrast that to Aphrodite, for instance, who sucks at disguises.
She's
right?
very, very bad at it.
She just makes her likeness too beautiful to be that person.
Everyone's just like, wow, you're hot. You're almost like Aphrodite. Oh, it's Aphrodite.
Oh, it's Aphrodite. and Poseidon is in kind of the same boat here almost, where it's like, I don't get the sense that he's terribly interested in really hiding his identity. He shows up to, like, since Zeus has now looked away from the battle, and even though his order for the Olympians to not do anything is still in effect, he can't really enforce it because he's not looking. So Poseidon shows up.
Zeus is away, Poseidon will play.
Yeah, and he shows up to the Aeantes, I believe it's them, the Ajaxes, as Calchas, and it's like a almost cartoony scene where he shows up and he gives them some rousing speech and he whacks them with his staff and he gives them power, and then it says like he zooms off or whatever. Yeah, and he sped himself off with the speed of a darting hawk. So the Lord of the Earthquake sped away from both. This is after, and Calchas, to be clear, like at least I envision him as like a sort of old bearded like seer. He's like a prophet.
Yeah.
So the image of this like old man showing up, giving some encouraging words, whacking them with his staff to give them power, and then like
zooming off is very not Calchas like.
This Tasmanian deviling his way all off into the distance is like really comical, and they pick it up. The Ajaxes pick it up. They're like, yeah, that was a god.
I love the mental image of him as a Tasmanian devil, like full of water, just like whoop. But yeah, they are not fooled at all. Ajax is big Ajax, I believe. Large Ajax. Giant Ajax is just like, oh yeah, I know that guy, it's Poseidon.
This is actually I think that's a lesser Ajax, Aurelian Ajax.
Is it small? Oh, they always call him Little Ajax. So I'm thrown off
Aurelian
when they
Ajax
call him
is
Telamonian.
Yeah, Telamonian Ajax is the big one, if I remember correctly.
Oh no, you're right. It is baby Ajax.
It's hard to keep them straight. I'm still
so many Ajaxes.
I'm still a little bit baffled as I think I brought this up in another episode, but I'm still baffled by the two Ajaxes. It's just such a weird naming choice.
It's very unoriginal.
It's there to, in a way, it's kind of unique because no one else has like this close relationship to someone who has the same name as them.
Yeah, that's very true. I think, like I said before, it's almost a way to kind of make Great Ajax seem all the larger and more giant and more imposing. That's kind of what comes to mind for me.
But yeah, anyway, I don't know, the form that the gods take sometimes is, I guess I wonder if there's any like real significance, if this is some reflection of their personalities. Again, like, you know, Athena is very crafty and clever, and so it would make sense that her disguises are always, you know, seamless or foolproof, and the others are just like, yeah, whatever.
I think sometimes it's probably there is a purpose to it, and then I think there's also sometimes where it's just like a matter of convenience. And, you know, like, oh, of course you would show up to them looking like that. It's, you know, the type of person they would believe, or it's the type of thing that would throw them off. I think we'll see. I'm honestly interested to get into this conversation more when we get to the Odyssey. Because there are a few instances of, you know, Athena and Odysseus disguising themselves. I know Odysseus is not a god, but I think the way that he disguises himself is
and sometimes
very,
Athena
very
disguises
interesting.
Odysseus.
Exactly, that also. So like there's a lot of interesting dynamics going on with the gods and disguise in the Odyssey that I'm excited to get to. But for now,
so we can put a pin in that.
Stick with the Iliad. And let's talk about Poseidon stirring things up a little bit.
Yeah, that's kind of what he does for the first. I mean, we've got like the first couple hundred lines where he's basically powering up all of the Argives, and yeah, as I said, this book paired with the next book sort of shows how swingy the battle can be, because the Argives are going to start winning now. They're going to get all this power. Hector's going to sort of run into this brick wall all of a sudden, and it's obviously simplifying it a lot. There's a few things that happen in here that I want to touch on, but that's basically the course of things, where, you know, the Trojans have been winning for the last, you know, while, ever since book 8, where, you know, the tides of battle turn. And then we get here where Zeus has finally turned his attention away, and we have these new contenders. You know, Poseidon has entered the ring, and he's changing things in favor of the Argives. Passes, like, I guess the Argives as, like, just in general. This book focuses a fair bit on the Cretans, Idomeneus and Meriones.
I was really excited for these characters to finally kind of have a little more time in the limelight, because Idomeneus and Meriones are kind of fun.
They're kind of goofy.
They are.
They've
got a little bit of a God, what is it? My brain is kind of making me think like Schlemiel and Schlemazel, but it's not quite that, really.
They have some Bill and Ted energy to them.
That's a great way of putting it. Oh, I
Do they
love that
not?
reference. A little bit, yeah.
They're like bros. I mean, it sounds exaggerated, but reading them, they have a little conversation where they meet in the tents. They're rearming for battle, and they're like, "Oh, why are you here?" It's like, "Oh, I'm here because I want to rearm and kill some goddamn Trojans." Like, I too want to kill some goddamn Trojans. I have so many spears.
Let's
Look at
do this. Come on, man.
it's it's
Go.
it's so like buddy buddy and braggadocious.
Well, they're one of those pairs in the Iliad, aren't they?
One is rarely seen without the other. I don't. I'm trying to think of any instance where they're like one is highlighted. Obviously, Idomeneus is the king, and Meriones is his like captain or something.
But they're just like they're gruesome twosome. They're a fun pair of buddies. They're two wild and crazy guys. I don't know if you get that reference. That's an old one.
That you might as well tell me.
I'm pretty sure that's the Three Amigos with like Steve Martin.
Oh God, I've seen the Three Amigos, but I remember very
If
little
I'm
of it.
recalling that correctly, I could be incorrect about that. I just know that phrase sticks out in my head.
I'll have to research it afterward.
Indeed.
No, you when we were talking about like sort of how Agamemnon fights, and like I guess the mood with which he fights is sort of very emotional. I found his fighting and hacking and whatever very angry, driven by like some sort of rage. I can't recall if you totally agreed or not.
No, I think so. And I recall saying that it was kind of one of the times where I felt like his emotions were actually put to good purpose.
Mhm.
Or, like that it suited the moment, actually. Whereas sometimes I find that I'm just like, I just feel like sometimes his outbursts can be out of place, and that's why it's a little disconcerting. It's like, yeah, where is this coming from? But this is one of those portions of the Iliad when Agamemnon is fighting where you just feel like this is kind of what this guy is meant to do, to like channel his weird emotionality into this thing that he seems to be suited to, which is fighting, and he's very good at it.
Yeah, a good outlet for his emotions. Again, it's kind of weird for me to think of stylistically how one person's fighting can be effectively different from one another, but comparing like someone like Agamemnon's fighting attitude to like Idomeneus's is like day and night. Idomeneus is having a good time. He even makes a
Yeah,
joke.
it's like I can practically hear the Queen song "Don't Stop Me Now" in the background while they're out there fighting together.
I want to point out this joke. It's a garbage joke. Okay? It's like one of the jokes that I would make if I was half asleep and not even thinking about it. But the fact that it's like in the midst of war is so it says so much about him. He's killed someone who is fighting in the war in exchange for one of Priam's daughters, and he kills this guy, and he starts talking over his corpse. This is around line 445, and he's like, "Oh, I'll drag you back to our ships, and I can marry you off to someone else. You'll find our price for brides not quite so killing," or whatever. It's
Yuck,
such like
yuck, yuck,
it's such
yuck.
a dad joke. It's
It is. It very much is. You gotta wonder, like, what you're thinking in the middle of a battle to say that kind of a thing.
yeah, he's not the only one to like shout insults. He does like he gives another pretty elaborate series of insults. I think it's to a living man. But yeah, he's so on it, and it kind of, in a way, it kind of gives this particular section a very light, a much lighter tone as opposed to maybe some of the previous battle heavy books where it feels sort of dire. And obviously it is a bit dire because the Argives are sort of getting unexpectedly routed, and now things are looking up. So the mood is kind of going up.
There's a lot more of, kind of, I don't want to say like gleeful, but just an energetic feeling to the Argives in this book. There's a lot more positive energy as opposed to desperation and despair.
Well, I think that's a super accurate read, since that's, I think, exactly what Poseidon is trying to do. He's getting everyone's fighting spirits up in order. I think there was one thing that the Iliad said about Idomeneus, and to be clear, I don't know very much about Idomeneus as a character. We're not really given much about him in the Iliad. Perhaps there's some interesting story about him, or background or what have you that we're missing. It describes him as like this is a paraphrase, but like as a warrior who doesn't care if he kills or is killed. He's just going for it. And there's a lot of talk about war or fighting, especially in his exchange with Meriones, as joyful. There's a joy to the carnage, which sort of, we talked about the Iliad sort of being an anti-war story, but these are clearly men who revel in the grind of war. They love it for one reason or another.
Interestingly enough, I think for me that almost kind of like emphasizes that message of anti-war.
Okay.
In the sense that, it's kind of uncomfortable at times to see people revel so much and take so much pleasure in such a gruesome and kind of inglorious situation. I can imagine that this would turn some people off. I can also imagine that there would be, have been the young boys in the audience who are just like, this is so badass. I love this. But I also imagine with all of the descriptions, and in this book, there are some seriously gruesome descriptions of death and injury and, other calamity. Like, that interspersed with such kind of gleeful and just overall like fun feelings feels uncomfortable a little bit. It does
Almost out
to
of place,
me,
maybe.
a little bit,
Honestly,
it makes sense when you think of the kind of glory to be won and all of those kinds of things, but there were times where I was like, this juxtaposed with like the, piercing out of someone's like intestines just feels wrong.
cracking their nose bones or whatever.
Yeah, exactly.
And this I guess will say a lot about me. But I'm sort of in the opposite camp. When I approach media, I am very, I guess, susceptible or interested in people who are having a good time. I don't know if this is because characters tend to be sort of serious or miserable or whatever, or somber is a nicer word. If we're to look at, again, looking sort of back at Hades, the video game, I hate to keep referencing it, but I like Theseus. Theseus he's having the best time out of anyone in the
Love
entire.
Theseus.
He's having the best time out of. He's living his best life, right? Like it's, and that sort of thing is hard to. It's hard to not like. Someone who's having the time of their life, even if it's in service of something that is. I guess this sort of goes back to some of the reasons why, maybe we like character, or at least I like characters, like Hannibal or what have you, is that at the end of the day, it's selfish, right? But they're having a good time. They're living as best as they can, and the fact that for me, and I imagine there are people like me as well, the fact that can eclipse like so many moral wrinkles is that's something I'm still trying to work through. But yeah, like
yeah,
my
it's
response
fascinating.
to my response to Idomeneus is sort of the opposite of you. Like I'm into it. I'm into his gusto. I wish I had that gusto because I guess if we're to apply it to sort of real life, we're not always going to be doing things that are great or fun or whatever. And so being able to watch someone revel or find joy in an environment that is otherwise hostile to joy or whatever, even if it's like morally despicable, it's still like weirdly inspiring.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's interesting because, like, I'm not sure I would say I dislike Idomeneus, or that my discomfort, at
mm,
that juxtaposition really overtakes my enjoyment of those passages. I would say I find him more compelling. I think the difference is that I find these people compelling. Like, I find Hannibal compelling. Not sure that I would say that I love him, because
right.
he is cannibalizing people, which is, you know, don't do that.
If only he didn't cannibalize people, he'd be such a cool guy
However,
to hang out with.
but like the food that he cooks with these people looks amazing. This is one of the biggest, like, problems and also loves that I have of that show, is like how delicious that food looks, and how disturbing I find it that I could be convinced to be a cannibal, because, like, the culinary prowess.
Exactly. And,
How
you know,
could you not eat that?
Idomeneus sees his own wonderful buffet out on the battlefield. You know, he's
Exactly. He's looking in and he's enjoying, and, like, if asked me, like, do I find the descriptions of how they kill these people to not be impressive, I would say of course not. Like, it's crazy. Like, it's compelling. Again, I keep coming back to that word. Like, it's just utterly compelling, and just doesn't necessarily mean that I love the guy, but does it,
mhm.
cause me to feel interested and exhilarated and captivated? Absolutely. Abso-fucking-lutely.
And I can absolutely empathize both with the soldier who's like screaming his life away as he dies, and the guy who's like, ha, ha, I gotcha. You
I
know,
killed your ass.
exactly. Like, and it's a weird, it's weird. It's a weird sort of. It's the duality of man. It has to
But
be.
it absolutely is. And it's also kind of the idea that, like, the Trojan soldier who is being gruesomely murdered and having his life slip away on the wind is also trying to kill him. So it's not like there are innocent parties in this. It's
Mhm.
on both sides. Kill or get killed. So it's not really a choice. And so the fact that Idomeneus kind of takes this
Takes you to the next level.
enjoyment, and just having fun with it, I think
He's not
is
just working;
utterly,
he's playing.
exactly. This is like a hobby.
A hobby. This is what he was born to do.
But I can also imagine that there are a bunch of soldiers on both sides for whom fighting was not just a necessity and a way to
Mm.
protect the interests of their side. It was also something that they enjoy doing. And, like, for all of the martial arts and boxing and whatnot that we have out there, like, people enjoy fighting. It's fun, and you want to learn how to do it better. These people were no different.
It kind of contrasts against something Hector says not one book ago, book 12, where he's declaring to Polydamas, the only sign that I need is fight for my city, fight for my people, and that like we can have someone who's motivated by something so like grounded, and on the other hand we have someone who's motivated or seems motivated anyway by something so I don't know, almost trivial or what have you. Is I don't know. I like Idomeneus.
I like
For better or for
Idomeneus, and I,
worse.
I like Meriones. I like them as a kind of tag team pair, as a couple of schmoes making out in their making their way out into the world and killing a bunch of people.
One thing that we also get sort of a mini version of is battling over corpses. I'm trying to remember if we've had any segments. I suspect we've had a few segments where someone goes down and then people move to protect the corpse.
Yeah, it's happened a couple times.
So perhaps this just stood out to me because we're getting to a book 17 primarily, where that's just all about one corpse.
Yeah, I mean, this is another one of those kind of rituals that I find in these books. Like, the protecting of the corpse seems more than just a simple act of, like, hey, let's, get our guy back. But it actually seems to be a really important part of the act of battle. And the stripping of bodies and the, gaining of the spoils of war in the moment, and the kind of act by the other side of preventing them from doing that
Hmm.
seems to be like a greater act than just what it seems.
I'm unsure of what like the ritualistic or otherwise cultural reasons are, but from a practical standpoint, we saw this earlier in the book, right? Where Idomeneus says to Meriones, "I've got 20 spears. These are all Trojan spears. I gather all of them up and I bring them back.
Just been
Because I
collecting them.
I love looting
Just
them. He's got a
spending my
spear
time
ready.
collecting spears.
Yeah, but like I imagine that's a fairly practical thing to do. Right? Like if you kill someone and you get their gear, that's worth
That's
something to
one
your
less
army.
It's one less weapon that they have and one more weapon that you have, or, one less piece of armor, one more piece of armor. It's a practical consideration.
Yeah, and
But I think it's also kind of a nana boo boo, I got your stuff. Like, not only did I take these spears, but now I'm going to kill you with your own spear.
yeah, that is something that goes unsaid, but definitely is happening. Because Idomeneus, when he's rearming in his tent with Meriones, he's like, "Hey, these are all Trojan spears," and they go out with Trojan spears and kill Trojans with them. So
yeah, it's great. They certainly feel fantastic about that. Like, look at these.
Yeah.
Look at how nice these spears are. These spears are. I took them from Trojans. Let's go kill some more of them.
like there's their loot and stuff. The corpses, as best as I can tell, burying your own dead is very important. They can't make it to the house of the dead if they're not properly buried, as best as I can tell. I'm not sure what the rules are about like the underworld and the shades of the dead and all that stuff, but like that's a big deal. It becomes a huge deal later on in the book with Hector's body, and so we're sort of. I'm just pointing it out because that's sort of like, I guess, a little preview of like the big version.
It is a theme that is going to factor far more greatly into the end of the story. And I think in a way, like, we get a couple short mentions of it in the beginning. Now we're getting slightly more in-depth mentions of it. With Patroclus dying, we'll get an even more in-depth mention of it. And it's all kind of building up to what we will see in the end with Hector's body and Priam asking for it back so that he can send his son off in the correct way. So in a way, like, this is something that I really love about what the Iliad does, is it'll kind of start to pepper in a concept that will then develop and evolve and become a much more influential part of the story later on.
Yeah, no, you're right. Like the idea of like burying or burning the dead or what have you, or even looting the dead is not something that's just sort of comes up. It's important to everyone, even if you're not a hero. It's still big. I guess the last we can come to a close on book 13 fairly soon. One thing I did want to draw attention to real quick. I don't know if this is. I'm not sure what purpose this has served, but we do get another little line from Menelaus, sort of, I guess, reminding us of why we're here.
Yeah, I actually thought this was particularly well placed, because I think as the Iliad goes on, and you don't see a huge amount of Menelaus. Like, you definitely see him from time to time, and those instances are important. But I think at times, with all of the action going on, you can kind of tend to lose a little bit of what the initial, like, how did we get here? It's like the trope in a TV show. Like, you're probably wondering how I got here.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a moment where he invokes that directly. And it's really powerful. And then he absolutely eviscerates a guy.
Pysander, I believe.
Poor Pysander.
I think we've seen a little bit of.
Well, in a way, I think it kind of comes right after he yeets Pysander off of this earth.
Lots of talking to corpses.
Yeah, there's a lot of kind of gloating, I guess, or I'm not sure if I would even necessarily. Yeah, soliloquizing. Soliloquizing.
Yeah, Menelaus soliloquizes to to Lysander, or I guess whoever's there to hear it. He's basically recounting, again, as I said, why he's here. He says, "You Trojans stole my lawfully wedded wife." He basically recounts his grievances in relation to that. I guess I can't remember what the Greek word is, but that hospitality rule.
The guest
Uh,
right.
yeah, I think he even invokes Zeus. Yeah, no fear in your hearts for the quaking rage of Zeus. This is line 718. No fear in your hearts for the quaking rage of Zeus, for the thundering god of host and welcome stranger. Which is interesting because Zeus is still very much on the side of the Trojans. He still likes them despite their violation of this. But Menelaus is, he hasn't forgotten, I guess, even if maybe we have throughout all the carnage.
And I mean, he kind of directly calls Zeus out. He says, Zeus, Father Zeus, they say you excel all others, all men and gods, in wisdom clear and calm, but all this brutal carnage comes from you.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
he's kind of saying, like, look what you've done. I'm the one who is wronged here. And
Mm-hmm.
these are the people that you're helping?
Yeah.
The audacity.
He has a slightly different response to Zeus from his brother, who's, I think he takes it more internally, whereas Menelaus is very, he responds at least to this in fiery anger.
And, who can blame him?
Yeah, no one. I mean, I I wouldn't blame him. This is and he's maintained this over the course of like almost 10 years. So he's the man knows how to hold on to his grudges.
He sure does.
Anyway, there's still more to talk about, but I think we can call it here. One of the things we didn't get to talk too much about is Hector and Polydamas and Paris. They have a little bit of an exchange at the end. Hector sort of goes toe to toe with Ajax.
Paris gets roasted yet again.
Paris gets roasted, although I will say I'm not sure if he quite deserves it this time. He even points out that even though he says like, "Hey, I'm a coward, but I'm not a total coward. I'm here, aren't I?" Like he is fighting on the front lines with his brother, and Hector's looking for his fellow commanders, and you're like, "Where are they?"
The way he starts it off gets me every time, because he says, Hector, bent on faulting a man without a fault. That cracks me up. Paris he's a character, for sure.
It's difficult to say if he's saying, bent on faulting a man without a fault as like a holistic statement about himself that he's faultless, or that in this particular instance, yeah, he is not at fault.
I think in this instance, it's him being like, what the fuck did I do? Like, why are you ragging on me yet again?
Yelling at me again?
But the way it just comes off because of everything that we know about him up until this point is just, the choice of words is spectacular.
Paris does not make a charitable reading of his own words terribly easy.
No, he's a Ponce. He's a rich Ponzi prince, and he goes out of his way to prove this over and over. And yeah, there's the odd moment where you feel like vaguely sympathetic for him, but like he's got a very high opinion of himself.
He's in like a camp adjacent to someone like Idomeneus for me. Like he knows what's going on, and he's kind of owning it.
I think so.
There's a super sympathetic or empathetic read where this is what he says to deal with sort of the overwhelming public backlash to something that perhaps obviously he did it thoughtlessly, or perhaps he did it in part because how are you supposed to turn down a goddess's gift, and why would you turn down Helen? And now he kind of has to live with this decision, and this is how he chooses to live with it. And so this is, whether he believes it or not is another thing entirely. Like that would be an ultra empathetic read of it.
There's almost a degree to which that I respect him, because it's just for like owning how much he thinks his shit don't stink. Like, at least he's honest about
no,
it. And I
he
think
knows his shit stinks. He's like, yeah, don't all of our shits stink, dude? Like, our
I don't
stinks come from
know.
the gods.
I read it a lot more as him being like, yeah, I think I'm awesome. What about it? Yeah, I know that there's probably moments that I'm not awesome, but most of the time, I'm pretty sure I'm awesome. That's at least the impression that I get. Like, obviously, he does know that he's flawed, and he admits to it on numerous occasions. There are so many times in the Iliad where he says, yeah, I know I'm a coward. I know that.
Even in
But, like,
this passage where he says,
but look at me.
like, at other times I might have shrunk from the fighting, true, but not today. Mother bore me, even me, not to be a coward through and through. So he's, like, implicitly admitting cowardice, but he's saying, like, hey, I'm doing it now. Like, here I am.
Yeah.
I think he knows his own nature, and he is resigned to it in a kind of irritatingly contented way.
Yeah, he's just very, like, glib about it. But on that note, though, I think
On
that
that
is a
glib
great
note.
place. On that glib note, I think it's a great place to take a little break.
Yes.
And when we come back, we will talk about what is one of my favorite books in the entire Iliad, Book 14, Hera Outflanks Zeus.
See you then. Hello, dear listener. We hope you've enjoyed listening to the first part of this episode of Homer Bound. There's more to come afterward, but I'd like to take a moment on this break to say a few special thank yous. First, thank you for listening. This podcast has no sponsor. Everything is produced in-house, on our own time, and fueled by our own interests. Sharing in our interests means a great deal to us, and knowing that others enjoy the content means even more. Please follow us on our Twitter at Homer_bound for new episodes, or just keep an eye on the podcast page, wherever you happen to be listening. I'd like to give another special thank you to my friend Llama for hosting the show with me, and I'd like to thank the composer and performer of the music you've been hearing during the transitions, who has said he'd like to be known simply as Llama's father. Thank you, Llama's father. I'd also like to thank Bubbo for her contributions to the audio, Webs2D for some original art, and Total Love for additional art and graphic design, and Ghosty also for additional graphic design. Another special thank you to our numerous guests for lending us their time and expertise, and a last but not least thank you to Dr. Daniel, who anchors every one of our episodes with his insights on our discussions. We appreciate his time and energy, and we encourage you to stick around at the end of the episode to make sure you hear what he has to say. Please consider reading along with us as you listen. We are reading the Robert Fagles translation, and while reading the text isn't necessary for you to follow along, you'll likely get more out of the discussions if you have. Feel free to pause and return later if you wish to do so. Okay, thanks for sticking through our break. I'll give it back to me and Llama on Homer Bound. And we are back to book 14. Hera outflanks Zeus. I have restretched my fill and legged my water. Llama, I can only hope you've done the same.
You change that every time, and it throws me off.
Well, you haven't commented on it until now. I've been trying to make it wackier and wackier, and you just keep not saying anything.
I mean, this is you we're talking about, so wacky is not exactly something that I'm not expecting.
My only purpose in saying in mixing it up at all is to get a reaction out of you for content.
Good luck with that. The best I can tell you.
I mean, you just got 45 seconds of conversation about this, so which is exactly what people are here for. Very fair.
Yeah, that you are here to talk, to listen to us talk about Wriste trying to get a reaction out of me, which seems to be something that you try to do on a fairly regular basis.
Well, people who are listening at home cannot see what I see. I know that I get more than what she lets on. So
This is true. I do make faces at him because sometimes he is
you have to.
ridiculous. You have a way of bringing it out of me.
We keep it classy around here.
We do keep it classy.
That's about to change.
I'm not sure exactly what classy means. But
Whatever
whatever
it
it
means,
means,
it's about to
it is
change.
about to change. Oh, it sure is.
So if there is we've been talking about, hugging and kissing in our content warnings. I don't actually, I think I might have forgotten to leave a content warning at the start of this episode, but whatever. I guess this is it.
You should know by now.
Yeah, that's right.
You should
listener.
know by now, and we can throw a little one in here. Look, there's violence, there are adult themes, and in this book, there's some banging. There's some
Yes, we've
love
long,
making.
We've long alluded to hugging and kissing. There's a slight
There's
mention
been
of
a
it.
little bit.
Yeah, there's been a slight mention of it in like book 3. Like at the end of book 3, I can't remember how much we talked about it, but it was there. But if there is any like sexy book that
This is it, folks.
if you have young children around, maybe you should cover their ears or I don't know, put on headphones.
Shoo them out.
Or don't.
Put some
maybe
headphones. Put some
maybe it's not
headphones
in your
on them.
philosophy, who knows?
Or maybe now is the time that you want to talk to your children about the birds and the bees and the gods and
the Iliad and Homer and and all
Yeah.
that and all therein.
a lot of things your children need to learn.
So yeah, we'll I guess to dangle the carrot a little bit more. Yes, this stuff does happen. However, there is a little bit of preamble that we have to observe. We don't jump directly into Hera rubbing herself with olive oil. We
To everyone's disappointment.
have to build up to it. And we sort of have this little it's a brief meeting of the kings. If we remember correctly, there have been a few wounded. We have Agamemnon, we have Odysseus, and we have Diomedes. Agamemnon, Odysseus, and Diomedes as our wounded kings. And we see all 3 of them here. Nestor has sort of gathered people up, and we're looking to form another plan, discover what course of action we take. And I think a couple times earlier in this podcast, I've mentioned that Agamemnon will recommend a retreat a few times in the book, a few times in this story. He did once in book 9, and he does one here as well.
Once again, he's been kind of shaken, and I don't know. This is one that I think is more serious, like it was in book 9, and as opposed to in book 2, right, where he kind of tests everyone.
In book 2, he was just pranking his army. He was like,
Just
"Hey,
a prank, bro."
let's go home. See what they say." And they're all like, "Yeah, let's go home." And then, book 9, Agamemnon sees that Zeus has turned on him. He's like, "Oh, we better get out of here." And he's talked down, I believe, by Diomedes and then Nestor. And now here, Agamemnon is making this suggestion again. He's saying, like, we better cut and run. We better start pushing our ships into the sea. We'll get out. We'll get as many of our men out as we can. This is obviously a bad idea. Odysseus makes some interesting. He makes some very practical points as well as some very.
Odysseus reads him his fucking rights.
Yeah, he rips into
literally.
him.
If you don't mind me reading a little bit of this because I love it. This Odysseus roasts Agamemnon.
Yeah, go
He
for
says,
it.
"What's this, Atrides? This talk that slips from your clenched teeth. You are the disaster. Would to God you commanded another army, a ragtag crew of cowards, instead of ruling us. The men whose Zeus decrees from youth to old age must wind down our brutal wars to the bitter end until we drop and die down to the last man." He is having absolutely none of this. I think he's just really tired of Agamemnon constantly pulling this shit where he is like, let's cut and run. And Odysseus is like, you're the one who brought us here.
And Agamemnon is. I'm trying to figure out what Agamemnon's headspace is like here, and perhaps this sort of segment is where my read of him as sort of like an insecure and uncertain and kind of like not fully prepared in terms of like wisdom or what have you lands, because Agamemnon, he strikes me as the sort of person who, maybe you've done this in your life when you've embarked on some, I don't know, precarious venture, like you chose to try to balance like 5 coffees in one hand or something, and you're like, I can do this, and then as soon as it spills, you're like, oh, I regret everything. You know that feeling?
Yeah. I
Like
think everyone has been there at some point in their life.
yeah, and then of course we can like zoom that up to like, business ventures or what, like that feeling of as soon as things go wrong, you start to
I've
regret
made a
everything that
huge mistake.
I've made a huge mistake, even though like you knew the risks and you knew that things could go wrong. Regardless, you did it anyway, and you lost the gamble. You've spilled your drinks all over yourself. You've gone bankrupt. In Agamemnon's case, you're reminded again that you've led your men to death.
You've embarked on a massive 10-year war.
Yeah, and so it's a very like it's weird because in order to go on this 10-year war, you have to have a lot of resolve. You have to keep going despite your hardships. But obviously, there's not like one, like just because Agamemnon has chosen to keep pushing this for however long doesn't mean that he would maintain it throughout, especially when his army is being routed. I guess kind of similar to
Sure.
how, like we talked about how Achilles has sort of made himself a part of the Trojan War by his pact with Zeus, or his plea to Zeus through Thetis. He's like, hey, the Argives will continue to lose until I show up. Makes himself part of it. But then he wants to leave in Book 9, where he's like, yeah, I'm sailing home. And I think these are two very similar things, where they're like, yeah, in the moment, I can resolve to do this, but after a while, I'm conflicted. I don't hold this feeling steadily, and kind of like when we choose to read characters in pop culture, media, video games, movies, etc., we'll usually ask ourselves, like, would this person act this way? Would they make this decision? I think this kind of challenges that sort of idea, which is that someone can be one way one day and then another way another day, kind of like how Agamemnon or even Achilles are with their resolves.
I think that's a really great read on it. And I think like Agamemnon's response to Odysseus in this situation is really interesting, because he almost kind of like sheepishly backs down and says, literally, I'm hardly the man to order men against their will to haul the oar-swept vessels out to sea.
Mm-hmm.
So whoever has a better plan, out with it. But he, just says like, oh man, you cut me right to the core. And you're kind of right,
Which again, I think supports my read of him as a sort of insecure, uncertain. But I think he also kind of, I don't know if he knows it and he knows what he's supposed to do with it, I guess, in a way. Because like he does, as I said, he backs it down. It's not like the strongest, most leadery move, but it's the right move now.
It is the right move now, and in some ways it is kind of the leaderly thing to do, of like, when you don't know what to do, ask someone who does. A good leader is actually one that is able to delegate, and this is exactly what he does. And Diomedes is more than happy to step up and say, I'm your guy.
I know what you're talking about. A good leader should know everything all the time, and they should be the only ones making decisions.
That's absolutely true. Everyone listen to Wriste.
That's how you know
if you're in a leadership
they don't listen to anyone
definitely
else.
Don't take any advice. Don't listen to anyone. Don't ever do that. That just shows weakness, and people hate that.
Exactly. I like that you bring up Diomedes, because Diomedes also has, I don't know, it feels like there's a little bit of insecurity with him as well. We've sort of seen a couple instances where this is suggested, like one in book 5, when it seems like he sort of sheepishly dodges the idea that he ran away from something, hiding behind Athena's orders. And then in book 8, Diomedes has a very bizarre conflict with himself as to whether or not to face down Zeus's lightning bolts and look cool, or live and maybe someone calls him a coward.
And obviously he goes with live, which is probably the better decision
He
there.
needed Nestor to talk him into it, but yes, he does eventually. And Nestor kind of had to. Again, Nestor's such a cool guy. He had to meet him there. You know, he didn't meet him at, what are you, crazy? You want to die? He said, like, you know, people aren't going to make fun of you. Come on. Like, oh, why would they? And even if they did, who
Yeah,
would
and you
believe
can
them?
totally go after him later. Like that's
Yeah.
fine. Don't do it now. Just live now and do it later. It'll be fine. No one's gonna say anything about it.
Yeah, so Diomedes also has this sort of insecurity going on.
Yeah, and Diomedes makes a comment here at the beginning of his, kind of volunteering to come up with a better idea that strikes me as potentially one of the sources of that insecurity, which is that he says, if you'll hear me out and not glare at me in resentment, since I'm the youngest born in all of our ranks. I think that position of kind of being the younger, less experienced member of the ranks puts him in a position where he's surrounded by all of these guys with experience and knowledge and wisdom, the Nestors of the world. And he is intimidated by that. He's intimidated by that, and he kind of takes that young guy stance of like, when teenagers are like, I'm old enough, I know what I'm talking about, you can't tell me that I'm not mature. I'm mature for my age. And everyone's like, all right, but you're also like 16, so maybe pipe down. It gives me that kind of energy of just like, I'm the young one and I know that, but like, listen to me, hear me out. I might actually have something to add to the situation.
Yeah, well, and he goes further even. Like he's like, yeah, I'm of high birth. Let me tell you my lineage. Like he opens with this.
Yes, because my noble birth, automatically means that I'm not cowardly, is how he kind of sums it up. Or he says you can't challenge my birth as low and cowardly, which strikes me as a really interesting way to kind of end
it's weird to pair it with that
spiel of like, look at my nobleness, my nobility, my, high birth as a virtue, but also don't call me a coward, because that would be totally not cool.
Could it be that all of these great men are harboring some deep-seated, deep-rooted insecurities regarding like how people see them and how they act and all that stuff?
Nah, definitely not that.
Probably
no
not.
possible way that it could be that. I think they are. I think there's a degree to which kind of each one of these men has at the very least had a moment in their life where they've kind of looked at themselves and been like, like, I know it's very kind of cliche, but like, who am I? And what am I really made of? What kind of stuff am I really made of? And it comes out all in different ways. But I think this is, Diomedes' turn to kind of have that moment of like, who am I? I'm noble, I'm young, I am in with this group of people, and I don't know how I feel about that, because all of them have these other things going on for them, whether it be age or experience or wisdom, that I, may not necessarily feel like I've had as much of that. So like, what is my place in the grand scheme of things? But he also has that bravado and that, courage and bravery to speak out and say like, hey, I have something to contribute here.
He has something. It's sometimes courage, but other times it's something else. I don't want to get too philosophical here, so I'll say this and then I'll let you say what you will about it, and then we can move on, because we can get really far into the weeds. But there is this idea of moral philosophy called, just simplify, it's virtue. I don't know if this is something you've studied or run into, but a virtue is something that kind of exists as like a nice medium between two extremes, and those extremes are vices. So if courage is a virtue, then the extreme would be foolishness, and the other extreme would be cowardice. And so, like, just having possession of a virtue like courage or what have you, isn't enough. You have to be able to temper it and use it to the correct degree. And sometimes Diomedes, I think, uses it a bit too much, if that makes any sense.
Probably.
It's not to say that
I
he
think that
doesn't
makes
possess
yeah, no,
courage.
that makes total sense to me. But it's like you have to look at the flip side of the coin and find the balance between the two.
And obviously Diomedes lives in constant fear of uh being found wanting on the other side, on the cowardice side. He'd rather risk foolishness than be cowardly. And I think we'll leave it at that. His plan is very simple. Like, hey, even he says to all of his kings, even though we're wounded, we should go out into the field. People will see us there. We might bring some from the back ranks forward, and yeah, we'll stay away from the spear fighting, but we'll rally our troops. And Poseidon is still going nuts.
Yeah. Poseidon is he angry.
Yeah, he excuse me, he delivers a big old speech that ends with a shattering cry. He surged across the plain, thundering as loud as 10,000 combat soldiers shrieked with Ares' fury when massive armies clashed, so huge that voice of the god of the earthquake let loose from his lungs. Even though it says earlier in that passage that he's saying his it's a passage, so I won't read it, but he's giving this, rallying speech, and it says he's disguised as a veteran, but I mean, come on, it's clearly a god.
Everyone knows. Everybody knows. There's no secret about who it is. But it really it boosts the Achaeans tremendously. Get this description of how it plants enormous martial power in each Achaean's heart. Like that, if he lets loose this battle cry that just juices everyone up.
Yeah, I guess before we move into the Hera stuff, and I know you're anxious to get there, but the content of Poseidon's words, this is true of the previous book as well. We didn't really talk much about it, but he's like the only person aside from Patroclus to really directly call out Achilles for being an asshole. That's what's going on in his speech.
Yeah,
Agamemnon.
he says he has no heart in him, not a pulse beat.
Yeah, Achilles' murderous spirit must be leaping in his chest, filled with joy to behold his comrades slain and routed in their blood. And I don't know how accurate a read that is. What exactly is going on in the heart of Achilles? The end results seem to speak to that.
Yeah, I mean, they do. I have a very different image in my head, which is my own personal headcanon that Achilles is in his tent listening to angsty grunge music and just bemoaning how crap everyone is to him and how they all deserve it and nobody understands how I feel. That's
I,
my headcanon.
I still remember the image you brought up of a kid peeking through the door to see people people are arguing.
Yeah.
In kind of perverse curiosity.
Yeah, or just people are fighting in the lunchroom at school and that one loser kid is just kind of peering through the door because they eat in the hallways because nobody likes him. Just watching because they don't want to miss the juicy, the juicy fight at school.
Yeah, and in this case, the fight at school is all about him, sort of.
Yeah.
This is all him.
Absolutely.
Yeah, who knows exactly what he's doing? He could be enjoying himself playing his lyre. He could be hanging out with, I don't know, Phoenix. Who knows? Yeah, now we can get into the Hera stuff. I don't know. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to zoom in on with this swath of this wonderful book?
I just love the way that this book portrays Hera in
Yeah.
all of her kind of cunning and look, this is a plan completely of her own making. She's watching all of this go down and kind of lamenting how her poor Achaeans are being picked on and, kind of pissed at Zeus and everyone else who is on the Trojan side. And she kind of gets it into herself that, like, I'm not going to just sit and watch this anymore. I'm going to do something about it.
Hmm.
And what can I do about it? I'm going to use my body.
Yeah, she knows that if Poseidon wants to help the Achaeans more effectively, Zeus has to be distracted. So she, as you said, she hatches this plan. One thing that I guess I just noticed as I was rereading, she gets ready to make this venture out to Zeus, and it reminded me. This is like around line 200 or so.
Hmm.
She goes to her chambers, and it reminded me of we've talked about these arming scenes, where people fasten well-made greaves on their hands and put on
Absolutely.
silver ankle clasps and
This is Hera's version of arming for battle.
yeah, this is Hera arming for battle, very sexy battle.
Extremely sexy battle. I mean, she goes to Aphrodite. I'm getting a little bit ahead of us, but first she rubs her boobs down with olive oil, which is fabulous.
Yeah, well, you're not getting too far ahead at all, because after she does this sort of arming ritual where she rubs herself down with ambrosia and olive oil, and she puts on a nice robe or whatever.
Yeah, she perfumes herself. She makes herself as appealing as she could possibly be to, sneak over to Zeus. And I mean, like, she literally, well, I guess she thinks this because she doesn't say this out loud, but this is what strikes her mind, is to have him lie with her naked body and induce him into a state of, like, numbing sleep so that he can't distract from what she wants to happen.
She's gonna reverse roofie him. She's gonna have sex with him and then put him to sleep.
I hate everything about what you just said.
It's
What
exactly
I wrote
what
down,
she's doing.
what I wrote down in the margins of my book was that she was going to fuck him out of warmongering. I like that a lot more than the reverse roofie analogy, which
I
just
think
makes me
it's
feel dirty.
extremely
I
accurate.
mean, I don't think you're entirely wrong. It just, oh, I hate that.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're not supposed to like it.
That's very fair.
I mean, this is
And
this is some dirty fighting going on.
and I think it's kind of one of those, like, tropes of, women using their body to get their way, which
Mhm.
at this point, makes a lot of people uncomfortable, and with good reason, because
Yes.
it's like, why does it always have to come down to, seducing someone to be part of the grand plan?
On the other
But
hand, she's the only
seduce
one
him,
who
she
gets
does.
she's the only one who gets the better of Zeus in the entire story.
Yeah, no,
So
and it says a lot about her cunning that she knows that this is the way to get to him. She knows him well enough to know that if she comes at him with all of the perfume and oils and the help from Aphrodite, that he is going to just be like, hubba hubba hubba. And hubba hubba he does. Like, he hubbas the hell out of her hubba.
Before we get to Aphrodite, this is perfect, because a while ago in an earlier episode I talked about the physicality of the gods, and this is like the correct book to talk about this, or to bring it back up, because this is, for one thing, this is obviously very physical, the act of seducing and sleeping with Zeus and whatnot. This is also where that line, this is around line 200, so that she might drift in oblivious warm sleep across Zeus's eyes and numb that seething brain. This is that passage where I was talking about how when we think about gods, we might say, oh, they're like the mind of God or whatever. It's sort of a ethereal, non-physical quality to it, but the brain is so organy and fleshy and stuff.
Wrinkly.
Yeah, and even the description of her, like, sexing herself up is, like, it says
incredibly detailed.
What I find interesting is that it says she cleanses her body of any blemish.
Her enticing body. Come on, you're gonna leave that out?
I mean, sure. Which is interesting to me, that like I guess that she even has blemishes, like that there are lasting uh what? What does that mean to have
I don't know. I took
blemishes
that
as
to
a
mean
god?
like any like dirt or schmutz or whatever.
Schmutz. I don't know. Like, I guess I don't know what exactly. Like, is she photoshopping herself to like?
God, Photoshop.
She's like stretching
I
the skin across her belly
love the
or
mentally
whatever.
image. Although, like it does kind of suggest that in a way that's kind of what she's doing. Then shortly after that, it's like kneading her skin with this to a soft glow and, creating this sleek, luxurious hair that drapes behind her.
Yeah, braiding her hair
And
and all
just
that.
it's kind of one of those things that reminds me of like the, Hector's flashing helmet and these other things where it's not just a flashing helmet, it's like more than that.
Mm.
It seems like she's creating this like otherworldly image of herself, which makes sense because she's God and she is doing this to seduce the greatest of gods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like if she's going to come at Zeus with all that business, it had better be ridiculous.
I don't know, the physicality of the gods is constantly interesting to me, just because yeah, it's not just the gods, but like even like fate itself has to be sort of wrestled into existence physically by physical action. Zeus has to throw his lightning bolts. He has to send the gods to physically stop Achilles from taking Troy, all that stuff. And it all just this is I guess just an echo of that. But yeah, she does run into Aphrodite and asks her for love, and longing with capital L's.
And this is one of those times where it feels like she's asking for like very real characters to come and do some dirty work for her. Love and longing don't seem like the, just the feelings. This is like, hey, can you get your homies love and longing to help me like set the stage for this?
It seems to be embodied in the form of like jewelry or some kind of accessory. It says a breast band. Also, by the way, this section with Aphrodite, the word breast and breasts happen a lot.
Like so many times.
There,
At
there's there's a lot
least
of there's a lot of there's a lot of titties happening in this particular region of the Iliad. So this is the part where you take the permanent marker and like wipe it out if you give your kids the Iliad.
I mean, just within like 2 paragraphs, I've counted the words breast or breastband at least 6 times.
As with any work of art where female sexuality is on full display or description, we do always have to ask ourselves, was like the painter or the author or whatever just super horny and they just wanted to talk about this stuff?
I think a little bit yes and a little bit no, because I think there is like a
Better
purpose
call it
that
A, don't
is,
call it B.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Like there certainly is a purpose that this is serving.
of
Like the
course, of
more
course.
you describe how alluring and sexy Hera looks, the more you understand how Zeus
Mm.
like immediately does the auga eyes.
His eyes shoot out of his skull and
Yeah, it's absolutely like Looney
he
Tunes
runs in the air.
cartoon when like Bugs Bunny is dressed as a woman and the Elmer Fudd or whoever it is just like, oh, it's very much how I imagine Zeus in the passage that's about to come up.
But yeah, that is also a very short little exchange where Hera she devises this trick, this lie. One of the things that I've noticed about characters who are depicted as cunning or what have you is that they tend to lie a lot. Just weave stories out of nothing. Which is very I don't know, it's very on the nose since this is being delivered by a poet, and that's kind of what they're doing. I mean, I guess it's supposed to come from a muse, but they're doing that exact same thing, I guess. I don't know if there's anything to that. But Aphrodite doesn't seem to really. She's not engaging with Hera's request very critically.
No, she doesn't know why she's doing this and she just kind of agrees to it like, okay, sure. Not realizing, and especially since Aphrodite is like one of those champions of the Trojans. She loves Paris. She smushed Paris and Helen together. She's been very much on the side of Paris because he pretty boy. But she doesn't really question this at all. And obviously it kind of alludes to Hera being, treacherous and deceptive here. But it's also like Aphrodite just doesn't question it.
There is a little line at the end of Aphrodite's sort of, I guess, parting words where she says, "You won't return, I know, your mission unfulfilled, whatever your eager heart desires to do." She doesn't like address specifically that, Hera has woven this story of like, oh, there are these two people or whatever, and I want to lure them back to love. Like it sounds like like when you show up to work and like, oh man, like my car broke down and I had to fix it. That's why I'm like 30 minutes late, and your boss is like, yeah, whatever. Like
All
your
right,
alarm
and it
didn't.
doesn't matter.
My dog ate my homework. And when Aphrodite says, whatever your eager heart desires to do, I want to think that, Aphrodite knows what's going on, or at the very least that Hera isn't telling her the truth, but she doesn't really care.
I think Aphrodite loves love. And I know that sounds cheesy, but like the impression that I get of her overall, and this is, the same thing with Paris and Helen. She's like, you're pretty and you should be in love. Love each other. I am making this happen. She just loves the idea of like her power to make people love each other,
Yeah, I
to
guess.
inspire
Yeah,
lust within people. And it seems
I can dig
like,
that.
like when Hera makes this request, Aphrodite says, "Impossible, worse, it's wrong to deny your warm request, since you were the one who lies in the arms of mighty Zeus." She's just loving this idea of like, I don't care really why this is happening, but the idea of you like
Someone using
pulling
love and
Zeus,
longing.
exactly, like using my powers that I love.
And Hera looks
I love this.
good now, right? Like, and we know that Aphrodite loves like beautiful people, so
Yeah, and
you
Hera
know maybe
saunters
that
up to
helps.
Aphrodite and is like, "Hey, can you help me out with this?" And Aphrodite is just like, "Girl, you look good. Of course I'll help you out with
Absolutely.
this."
God. Is Aphrodite just like white girl drunk all the time?
I honestly think she is. I love to think of her that way. Like it's a fun way to think of Aphrodite, but I honestly think that she kind of is. And she like wanders into battle that one time. Zeus is just like, "Go drink wine and look
She
good."
has a kind of carefreeness about her that, honestly, when we think about it, like the having no cares is a very
It suits the
appropriate,
goddess of love and lust.
especially since love has famously in myth caused people, and stories just in general, caused people to do some disastrous or unwise things. So you know that's her deal. I wish we got more of Aphrodite, but
I also wish
unfortunately,
we got more of Aphrodite. She's a great character in the Iliad. And I always kind of end up cracking up a little bit when she comes around because her parts are pretty funny.
she's usually having fun, or enjoying herself, even if she is like terrorizing Helen or whatever.
Poor Helen. Poor Helen.
Yeah, it's not nice of Aphrodite to do this. But yeah, we move on from Aphrodite and we go to our last sort of stop before Zeus, where Hera visits Sleep, the twin
Yes,
brother
a
of Death.
god I wish that I was far more acquainted with. Sleep, where you at? Come visit me sometime. Help a girl out. And Hera comes to Sleep and is like, tells Sleep basically exactly what she wants. Well, not entirely what she wants to do to Zeus, but exactly what she wants Sleep to do to Zeus, which is, do your best, do your work. When I seduce him, put him to sleep.
And apparently she's asked for this before, which is very funny. Sleep is like, hey, I got in trouble last time you did this. He mentions Night. Night protected him from Zeus that one time. Had to do with Hercules, or whatever. Heracles,
Heracles.
excuse me, not the Roman version, the Greek version.
Yeah, no, he puts Zeus to sleep, and Zeus gets up and is pissed.
Yeah, mega pissed that he was slept against his will. What's really funny about
Slept against his will.
unless there's something else about the his recounting of the last encounter with Zeus that he had. What I find really funny is how easily
Oh
persuaded
yeah.
Sleep is.
I wrote in my book, like, so easily bribed with lady favors, tisk tisk. Because that's exactly what happens. I mean, Hera offers him a gorgeous bride, one of the younger graces with a capital G. And Sleep is just like, wait, hold on a minute. This is the one that I like. I'm in.
Yeah,
Zero
Pasithea
question.
is what he names. I don't know who she is. Who is Pasithea? I just noticed this. This is around line 330. There's like, it feels like a little dumb play on words. He's like, all my days I've tossed and turned for her, which is
I
a Sleep
loved
phrase.
that. As someone who does a lot of tossing and turning, not over, men or women, that cracked me up. I've tossed and turned from her.
Yeah, but yeah, like
It's funny because it's about sleep
yeah,
and it's sleep.
Sleep. It's another great play on words. We've had two plays on words. One from Idomeneus and one from Sleep.
It's a very punny, or maybe not punny, but just
It's a
very
play on words.
dad jokey chapter.
Oh but yeah, it's funny because again, Sleep gives like this page long objection to why like he wouldn't do this, and then there's just like a little paragraph, and Hera's like, "I'll give you one of the younger graces," and then Sleep's like, "On with it." Absolutely. And this is contrasted with and again, like I hate to keep repeating the performative aspect, but like on line 290, we get a description of his voice, the soft and soothing drifted back and forth, and we have this sort of like light, feathery sounding kind of thing where it even starts with like Hera, Hera, and like you can sort
I'm
of
like
imagine.
yawning right now thinking about it.
Yeah, and then the next thing that he says after, like, it just snaps him awake. He's like, "Oh, on with it! Absolutely, I'll do it." It's a fun little scene. I think it's funny.
I thought it was adorable.
I don't know if there's anything more to mine from this in terms of meaning or enjoyment.
I mean, the greatest meaning that I take from it is that Hera is an incredibly convincing person. And it just goes back to that, that cunning quality to her again. She knows how to dig things out of people fairly easily. She seems to have a really good knowledge of like the best way to kind of push someone's button in such a way as to get them to agree to something.
Yeah, I think one reading of this could be that Aphrodite and Sleep are very easily convinced kinds of people, but the other side of that is that Hera knows what will easily convince them, and so she makes it look easy, even if it's
Yeah,
maybe
and,
not.
and likewise, she knows the way to get to Zeus
Hmm.
is through his man parts.
Yeah.
And
Fast forward to that. There isn't really much more to say. What she says she'll do is
she
what
does.
comes out of it. She goes to
There's a
Zeus.
one little line that absolutely cracked me up every single time I read it, which is as she goes to Zeus, she scales the Gargaron peak, the highest crest of Ida. And Zeus spotted her now, Zeus who gathers the breasting clouds. This is where I am a child, y'all. I am a little teenage mind, type of person.
Yeah. This
Zeus
is the
makes
only time where Zeus is given this kind of epithet.
Zeus makes boob clouds.
I
And
think
I
I think
think that's
Homer is trying to
wonderful.
I think Homer's trying to, I don't know, there's like some subliminal messaging going on here.
I
He wants
know,
us
and
to have
this very well
boobs on
could
our
just
mind.
be could just be a translation thing. But I wonder what that translation is. I just giggle every time I see breasting clouds, and then immediately after that, the lust overtakes him, and they get down and dirty.
There is also one also kind of hilarious section. This must be intended for comedy. This is like I guess a little bit after line 370, where Zeus is like, I have to sex you now. And the reason why is because my lust for you is so great that it goes far beyond the lust I had for Ixion's wife. It goes far
Oh, no,
beyond.
he goes into like a laundry list
has
of
a
women he's
list.
banged
He just,
and
like, goes through
uses
list.
this to convince Hera that I must have you now because all of these chicks that I've banged, I lust for you more than any of them in this moment.
Yeah, Zeus is not a very he's not a very faithful husband to Hera. I don't know, like this feels so made for comedy. Like, cuz like why would Zeus say this? Like if this wasn't a comedy or if this wasn't like a comedic point, why would he just, cuz we I think we also know that, well, I guess this isn't said explicitly in this, but I get the sense that Hera tends to get rather pissed whenever Zeus like goes off and has sex with some mortal and then comes back and like that usually, if Hera finds out that you've had sex with Zeus, like there's a good chance that she'll like curse you or like, I don't know, make your life terrible.
She's
Et
not a
cetera.
fan of it. She's definitely not a fan of it. Although I wonder to what extent it's kind of like in the historical sense of like kings were kind of expected to stray. Doesn't mean their wives loved it, but they accept it for what it is. So in this sense, like Zeus throwing all these women he's had sex with back in her face as a way to tell her how much he wants her right now is something that probably doesn't surprise her. But like, does she love it? She does not.
It's a very backhanded kind of compliment. I mean, I believe Zeus
And
when he says that he's raring to go, but at the same time, he could have chosen many better ways of expressing this.
that is like understatement of the century. um, and then what I like is kind of how Hera comes back to that and for all intents and purposes says like I don't do walks of shame. You know, I'm not gonna, you know, do this with you when, you know, everyone can see and people are gonna know, which strikes me as kind of odd that like why would anyone care about them banging? It's the king and queen of the gods. But she doesn't really want that to be, she wants it to be veiled and unseen to other people.
I guess I'm curious as to what the purpose of that would be. I have not actually thought about that. Perhaps we'll be able to pick this up at some later time after I've meditated on this. I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think the purpose of what she's saying in that moment is really to put him in the exact spot that she wants him. Because she has this plan and, you know, wants to apparently bang him in the bed that Hephaestus built. Which being her son is a little bit awkward.
No, not really. I mean, Zeus is also her brother, so incest is just kind of there. Like there's,
that's very true.
It's all part of the fun of being a god.
Oh, that just visibly made me cringe. It's not, you're not wrong though. Like it's that is just the reality of who these gods are. It's one big happy family? Question mark?
Yep, absolutely. Everyone loves each other.
But so Zeus responds to this by saying, I am most amorous and I must have you now. And don't worry about everyone seeing us. I'll, you know, make a little golden shield of like clouds.
Like, brings the clouds
whatever
in and stuff. And then as soon as that happens,
must have you now.
I mean, I don't know if Zeus is like a 2-pump chump or what, but you know, it happens, and then in sleep puts him to sleep.
We're not going to go into this in depth, but I would love to hear a discussion of the merits of whether or not Zeus is in fact a 2-pump chump. That just cracks me up.
Who knows?
Nevertheless,
that'll be a
Zeus
bonus
is.
episode. A bonus episode.
Oh.
We can talk about the potential. Anyway, sleep puts him to sleep, and sleep also goes to Poseidon. Like the whole reason for this was so that Zeus is absolutely unable to interfere with his own war, and that Poseidon can help the Argives to the fullest.
As I said from the last book, while Zeus is away, Poseidon will play. And this is his moment.
The god Poseidon, he rallies the men. He gives them greater power. It says at line 450 that the kings themselves, overcoming their wounds, arrayed themselves in all proper battle order. Diomedes, Odysseus, Agamemnon, and that's how it goes. And to sort of like punctuate the fact that the tides of battle are starting to turn again now that Zeus is sort of asleep. Hector, he gets hit by a rock. Ajax just chucks a rock at him, and he goes down. He doesn't die. His buddies splash some water on his face and kind of wakes him up. But
yeah, the description of like this injury is gnarly, and they kind of describe Hector being like totally winded, and then splash some water on him. He kind of gets up and then vomits a bunch of blood clots,
yeah.
Which is just so gnarly.
At risk of sounding like a broken record, and I shouldn't even say that because I'm going to keep coming back to it. The idea that so when there's discourse around the Iliad and Achilles' non-participation policy, there's this sort of idea that Achilles is holding back and is holding himself back, and therefore the Argives are losing, which is sort of true. But what we're seeing here, and what we have kind of seen throughout the story, is that without this sort of pact with Zeus that the Trojans would have this victory, it seems fairly likely that the Argives could just win without Achilles. Ajax has proven himself to be much stronger than Hector time and time again, and I wouldn't doubt that, Diomedes or even maybe Agamemnon could go toe-to-toe with him. And
yeah, it's
he's
not
just one
at
hero.
all like they are completely incapable without Achilles. It's just that they know that he will kind of be that final nail in the coffin. And they very much want that, because I think everyone wants this war to just be over with. They've all been fighting for such a long time. It's
more that we know that Achilles has made it so that they will never win without him. He's rigged it.
Yeah.
But without this rigging, I think we see glimpses of what the Achaean army might be capable of. Because again, like the Trojans have kind of one great hero. I mean, they know it. It's Hector. And the second best of the Achaeans, Ajax, is very capable of taking him down. He's done so time and time again. And Diomedes, I think we skipped over that part, but he hit Hector's head with a spear. The helmet deflected it, but he's gotten close, and were it not for the
if it were not for the gods' direct intervention, Hector would be dead.
Were it not for Zeus, this would not have gone their way. And now that Zeus is asleep, again, this is why I said I kind of like that book 13 and book 14 are sort of together with us for this episode, which is that we were sort of seeing the real effect of what Achilles has set in motion, and what it might be able to look like without that. That's what this pair of books sort of
absolutely
represents to me.
I think it is a really good pairing of books. For exactly that reason, I think you make a really good point there.
Yeah, and the rest of the book is, the Trojans sort of on the run. Not necessarily on the run, but they're being pushed back. The Achaeans have found their second wind. And yeah, Zeus is asleep, and we'll see what happens with that sleep in the next book, in the next episode, which I am incredibly excited for. We will have Dr. Daniel with us for book 16, which, as best as I can tell, is one of if not his actual favorite book, which is why I couldn't resist having him.
I think it's perfect. I think it is the absolute perfect episode to have him on. I am also super excited about this. We are both so thankful for his input in this venture, which
Yeah,
has been
absolutely.
invaluable. And yeah, I'm super excited. Books 15 and 16 are very exciting. And to have our resident expert with us is going to be a great time.
Yeah. And now you can listen to our resident expert again. He'll have something to say about what we've said. So yeah, don't skip that. And we'll catch you on the other side of it.
Hey everybody, my name is Daniel, otherwise known as Dr. Daniel, Dr. Dan, or the Dancing Grad in my Twitch and Discord circles, and I'm here to comment on Wriste and Llama's conversation about Iliad books 13 and 14 and some of the awesome points that they brought up in their conversation. First off, book 13, and early on in the discussion, Wriste and Llama noted how weird it is to have these two guys named Ajax. We have Ajax the Greater and Ajax the Lesser, otherwise known as Telamonian Ajax, so called because his father's name was Telamon, and Oilean Ajax, so known because his father's name is Oileus. Ajax isn't a particularly popular name in ancient Greek, but nor is it entirely unheard of. It's no more notable than, say, having two Timothys in the same classroom, or having two Samanthas in the same workplace. What's really interesting to me, though, is the etymology of the name Ajax. In the ancient Greek, the name is actually Aias, transliterated to what in English would be Aias. And that name derives from an exclamation, ai, which is often an exclamation which is made in times of lament or distress. This idea of lament or distress can be felt pretty acutely in both of the Ajax's afterlives after the Iliad. In a previous episode, I talked about Telamonian Ajax's afterlife after the Judgment of the Arms, and how his plot to kill the entire Greek army was foiled by the goddess Athena. So when he's revealed as a traitor in the play Ajax by Sophocles, he talks about the fact that his life was meant for nothing but suffering because of the nature of his name. Oilean Ajax doesn't have a very good reputation after the events of the Iliad and the Trojan War either, seeing as he commits acts of rape and temple desecration after the fall of Troy. So, both Ajaxes seem pretty appropriately named, given the etymology of their name deriving from a cry, from an exclamation that indicates lament or grief. The next point that I want to bring up kind of pushes back against something that Llama and Wriste have been saying about the Iliad having a sort of anti-war message, which I can absolutely see from a modern point of view. However, to the ancient Greeks, war was as much of a fact of life as religion was. Farmers would actually plan crop rotations around when the able-bodied men who would be tending to the fields would be out on campaign. Social class reform around the time of the Athenian lawmaker Solon was based on whether you had enough money to buy your own horse and become a cavalryman in the army, or whether you were simply an infantryman. War was even baked into the gender codes and the gender norms of the time. Going out on war, going out on campaign, and fighting was seen as a masculine ideal, whereas the feminine ideal in the time of the Homeric poems was to lament the war dead. So while we absolutely can say, from a modern point of view, that the Iliad seems to espouse a sort of anti-war ideal in the fact that it exposes all the brutalities of war and the awful things that can happen within it, my general corrective would be to see it through slightly different eyes in terms of the ancient context. Rather than talking about the Iliad as anti-war, perhaps the Iliad exposes the realities of war in ways that those at home in Greece might not necessarily be attuned to. Another question that came up in the discussion of Book 13 was, why is it so important for one side of a war to get a corpse back after they lose that soldier? And Wriste and Llama had some excellent thoughts about things like weapon management and getting the advantage on the battlefield. The main underlying reason, though, is ritualistic and religious. The side of the army that lost their soldier needs to get the corpse back in order to give that soldier a proper burial. The soul of a person who's lost their life cannot rest in the afterlife without the body's burial. And if a body isn't buried, it's actually ritualistically impure. It's an affront to the gods, both above and in the underworld, and it's a violation of propriety in war not to allow the burial of an enemy combatant. One of the worst fates that a soldier could undergo on the battlefield was to be killed, but then not recovered and sent back to his family or his homeland. rather being left on the battlefield to become carrion, to be picked at by dogs and birds. And this threat is felt all the way at the very beginning of the Iliad in the proem, when the poet talks about heroes that are left out to become a feast for the dogs and a feast for the birds. This lack of burial for the dead is going to become a very important concept in the final books of the Iliad, books 22 through 24, where there are two corpses in particular that are going to be focused on. First, that of Patroclus, because Achilles can't let him go, and second, that of Hector, whom Achilles mistreats very badly after he kills him in book 22. But then in book 24, the father of Hector, Priam, comes to Achilles' tent to ask him for his son's body back in order to give him a proper burial. Then we come to book 14, the book that houses the infamous bed trick, so called because Hera entices her husband Zeus to have sex with her and then tricks him into falling asleep so that she and Poseidon can help out the Achaeans. Perhaps appropriately, then, there's a lot of focus on the female form, particularly that of Hera, as she arms up, so to speak, for her battle in bed with Zeus, and when she talks to Aphrodite in order to get the breast band that is going to cause love and desire. Llama counted a large number of appearances of the word breast or breastband in a very small amount of space in the text, and it does seem that one of the ideas that ties together ancient objectification and modern objectification is the focus on the female body, particularly the chest area. However, it's not just Hera's or Aphrodite's breasts that get ogled, and nor is this confined to the story of the Iliad in particular. In the afterlife of Helen in particular, there are stories about what happens after the Trojan War is over. According to some sources, her husband Menelaus wants to put her to death for running off with Paris. But in order to prevent him from doing so, even up to the moment when he's raising his sword to kill her, she apparently bares her breast. And at the sight of it, Menelaus falls back in love with her and doesn't want to kill her anymore. This is a story that's told in the play Lysistrata by Aristophanes and also the play Andromache by Euripides. And it's a really interesting weaponization of the female body in order to prevent any harm from coming to her. All of that to say, breasts are powerful stuff in ancient epic. Finally, there are 3 points that I want to make about translation choices that I fear will burst Llama and Wriste's bubbles slightly, but there are 3 points that I want to bring up about comparing Fagles' translation against the ancient Greek. First off, as discussed on previous episodes, whenever we see a capital letter on something that we might consider an abstract concept, for example, capital L love or capital L longing, the question becomes whether we're talking about an actual personification or we're talking about the abstract concept. And this is the issue in Book 14 when Hera is talking to Aphrodite. She says, from Fagles' translation, "Give me love," capital L, and "give me longing," capital L. In the Greek, however, the version of the text that I have does not capitalize these terms. The Greek here is dos nun moi philoteta kai himeron. Philoteta kai himeron, affection and longing with lowercase letters as sort of the abstract concepts, because these ideas get bound up, built into the breastband that Aphrodite gives to Hera to wear. So despite Fagles' choice to capitalize those terms, we don't actually deal with personifications here. Second, Hera goes to sleep, otherwise known as hypnos, and to Wriste and Llama, I encourage you to have in mind the image of Hypnos from the video game Hades when you're thinking about this scene. When Hera talks to Hypnos, she asks Hypnos to help her out with her plan, and promises him marriage to the youngest of the Graces. And he says he's been in love with Pasithea, so he's very excited to marry her. And in Fagles' translation, he says, "All my days I've tossed and turned for her," meaning Pasithea. And Wriste and Llama noted what a clever little play on words this is, since we're talking about sleep, tossing and turning for somebody. Unfortunately, the Greek here is a little bit more milquetoast. The Greek here is pasithein hestautos e eldomai hemata panta, which literally translates to Pasithea, for whom I myself hope for every day. So a little bit more milquetoast, but Fagles sort of layers it on with the pun about tossing and turning. And he does something similar as well later on when he refers to Zeus as the one who gathers breasting clouds. The term for this in the Greek is actually Nephelegereta Zeus, literally Zeus the cloud gatherer. So the term breasting, according to Wikipedia, means to face and move forward against or through something, so meaning clouds that are moving in the sky. And I think this is Fagles having a little bit of fun with the translation. Nephele Geretas Zeus is a very common stock epithet for him. We see him refer to this a lot throughout the Iliad, even in contexts that do not involve sleeping with Hera. So unfortunately, the Greek a little bit more milquetoast, but we're seeing some of Fagles' ingenuity at work here. All right, I think that about wraps up everything that I had to say. So thank you for listening, and I'll see you on the next episode of Homeward Bound as a guest for Book 16. And until then, I'll throw it back to Wriste and Llama.
Thank you once again, Dr. Daniel, for your time and insight. Always enjoy hearing what you have to say about our discussions, and thank you, dear listener, for tuning in. We hope you'll take the opportunity to read along with us, since there's plenty to love in these stories, and please keep an eye out for our follow-up episodes by following us on Twitter at Homer_bound, or wherever you happen to be listening to us now. We hope to see you in the next episode. See you then.